Well, I never, if it isn't another Real Opinions. Welcome back to my R's and Pews, which is my review of Mary Poppins Returns. Jesus Christ. In case you can still hear through your bleeding ears, yeah, this is a review for Mary Poppins Returns. The sequel, yeah, and it's definitely a sequel to Mary Poppins. I would not call myself a massive fan of the original, but I would definitely say that I enjoy it, and it is one of, my childhood favourites. But when hearing that they were going to do this kind of return to the format, it's not one of these films that I kind of hold on a pedestal of they must never be touched again. I kind of thought that if they are going to return to it and do like they have done this different time period, I was actually kind of interested in what they were going to do with it. Some of the initial trailers and some of the initial thoughts coming out made me skeptical, but to be honest, overall I have to say that I actually thought it was a worthy sequel. Again, this is coming from someone that does not think that the first one is this perfect, amazing film, just that it's a very good Disney film and it's a fun thing for the family. I think that it, lived up to the expectations set by the original, and I think that it managed to basically deliver on what I kind of expect from a film like this. Mary Poppins Returns is set a number of years after the first film. I don't remember the exact amount, and the two Banks children have grown up and are now in financial difficulty and need help to keep the house, and so Mary Poppins returns. It stars Emily Blunt as Mary Poppins, Lin-Manuel Miranda as Jack the Lamplighter, Ben Whishaw as Michael, and Emily Mortimer as Jane. This may be setting the bar quite high, but I feel like if you really liked Paddington in recent years, I think that this had a very similar vibe. I don't think that it's near the same quality as Paddington or Paddington 2, definitely. It's just got that mix of wholesomeness and positivity and sweetness, and at the same time it's not completely sugar-coated. It's just a very, it feels weird to say honest, but just a very honestly optimistic is I suppose the way to put it, film. The particular highlights for me were Emily Blunt, actually. I'm glad that I listened to one behind-the-scenes thing before I went to the film, which was basically saying how she didn't want to be just an impression of the original character and she wanted to focus more on the original book character. She's a bit more fun-loving and a bit ruder than portrayed in the slightly sweeter Disney version. I think that it played off well. I think that it was a good continuation of the character while at the same time not being exactly the same and not being called a carbon copy, and I think that they did enough to let her shine, although I think honestly she could have had, strangely enough to say, I think that she could have had more scenes. Yeah, I think she could have had more times on camera or just more time to show a more emotional side, but thankfully those moments are saved for the family, which I think were mostly great. I think that some of the kids have their weaker moments, as most child actors do, and especially when you look back at the older Disney films, they certainly do. I'd say a particular white for me would be Ben Wishaw's performance, which I really liked. Really liked, and his particular storyline just kind of really got to me. It was just really sweet, and well, it was sweet and sad, and all of the moments when Ben Whishaw was on screen were the moments where I was most captivated by the film and most interested and just fully with the film, because I think it's a great example of how you can showcase very adult emotions in a children's film without having to change them to be something more relevant for children. I think that they can still understand adult fears and adult pain. It doesn't shy away from it in any particular moment, but it still handles it with the same, like I said, the positivity of the rest of the film. And I would say that if I was going to be returning to the film, I'd say that that was the thing that I would look out most for, is just his performance again and those touching moments with the family. Now onto some quibbles with the film. I would say that while I didn't dislike any of the songs, I wouldn't say that any of them stood out as a particular favourite, and I wouldn't say that they were particularly amazingly memorable. Just an hour out of being out at the cinema, I didn't think I could really sing any of the songs back, and I just kind of found whenever I was thinking of a song from the film, I was just actually getting the original songs in my head. Oh, I will also mention that, yeah, it is, since it's a sequel, there's none of the original songs, which I was actually quite thankful for, but then again I wish there was one song that really stood out and really stuck with me, because a lot of the musical moments that did stick with me were where they used old bits of the score, like from the original film, and that was to kind of hit on emotional points, and I think they used that really effectively. Actually, I know I said going into negatives now, but just to flip back to a positive, is that I think they tied in really well with the original film. You can tell that they actually properly looked at the original and saw, what can we do with this film? What can we do to make it a necessary sequel, or just a worthy sequel? And there are moments from the original film that I had completely forgotten that they bring back up in this film, and not in just a offhanded reference way, but in a way that actually ties it into the plot and actually makes those moments in the first film even more meaningful in a lot of ways. And I thought that was really cleverly done. And if anything, I feel like I have more of an attachment to the first film now after seeing it, which I think is just a really great showing of how well they managed to pull this film off. And again, I know I'm sounding strangely very positive in this review all the way through, but I'm not going to say it's my favourite film of the year or anything like that. I just think that I went in there almost half expecting a dud, and I came out with a very fun experience and smiling for like the last 90 minutes. I think it's a good experience. I think it's not a necessary thing to see in the cinema, but I don't think you'll be disappointed, and I think there'll be a fun time. Now that I've said that, back to a negative, which is that there is a Meryl Streep character, which is, it feels harsh to say completely useless, but I think that if you cut every scene involving Meryl Streep's character, you would still have the same film, and I think if you took the scenes with Meryl Streep's character and instead changed them to be focusing more on Emily Blunt's Mary Poppins, taking that time from the film to have maybe another song with Mary Poppins, I think that would have actually improved the film. Not saying that there's anything necessarily wrong with Meryl Streep's performance or the character, it's just that it feels like a rather unnecessary part of the film. It feels almost like they gave it a bigger segment just because they managed to hire Meryl Streep, and I think that if this was performed by a different actress, then maybe that would have been more of a discussion to maybe leave this scene on the cutting room floor. Yeah, and it's not like the film even dragged either, it's just that it was a sequence where it just didn't feel like it actually added to the rest of the plot of the story, and I feel like you could have used that time better to develop the existing characters more, as opposed to introducing a Meryl Streep character for a very short amount of time that doesn't really lead to any greater emotional payoff at the end, or even necessarily like a great song. I'll tie off with like one other minor positive, which is that I was expecting Lin-Manuel Miranda to kind of irritate me a bit, and that's saying as someone that's a massive fan of his work. I just wasn't looking forward to more fake Cockney, and I wouldn't say that he completely blew me away, and I never got over the accent, which of course you're not really meant to, but I felt like I enjoyed it straight away, and I kind of found myself accepting the accent very quickly. And I think that he has a song with Emily Blunt in the 2D section of the film, the Rose Bowl, and I think that's the closest it comes to really great musical in that section, because he gets just a whole sequence to kind of do his thing, and as well as Emily Blunt also works really well on that song, and they kind of bounce off each other. And again, while not necessarily that song stuck in my head, I was enjoying it the whole time, and I felt like it really added to the chemistry between the two characters, and it was a really fun section of the film. But yeah, a strangely positive review from me. Yeah, like I said, I'd say that's a really fun experience. I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to go out of the cinema to go and see it, but if you were a fan of the original and you were kind of skeptical about this one, I'd say to maybe dampen that down a bit, the skepticism, and just be prepared to, if you just want a fun time where you can just kind of enjoy the feeling of being a child again, then yeah, I'll definitely go for it. There's just lots of little moments that made me smile throughout this film. And again, I don't think that adds up to a truly great cinematic masterpiece. I just think that it was a fun film, and I just think that it made me smile.